Hello and welcome to another episode of Fintech Focus TV with me, Toby Babb. Today, really excited to bring with you another guest from the USA. It is Adam Blumberg from Interaxis. How are you?
I'm great, Toby. How are you?
Really good indeed, thanks. Thanks so much for coming on the show. We had a good chat last week and I found out and learned a lot from it. This is a subject which I'm really excited about because, look, of all the things that we've seen this year that I find one of the most interesting and probably game-changing is this sort of what I would probably call the sort of third wave of the crypto world and the digital asset world, and this time looking like it's here to become mainstream and stay. You've sort of gone into it and making it your sort of world and taking it upon yourself to educate the world on what's happening in that whole space at the moment. I'm not going to steal your thunder. I'm not going to give it half the intro that you're going to be able to do as well. So Adam, I'm going to pass it over to you for a second to tell us a little bit about Interaxis, why you've done it, your journey to starting the business up for yourself, and what you're doing at the moment from to become a YouTube sensation. One of the most fascinating people that I follow on LinkedIn. There's constant value that's been done, and if you're watching this episode, absolutely I suggest that you follow Adam as well, because there's a constant stream of really cool stuff that comes out on that too. But Adam, tell us everything. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Everything. Thanks so much, Toby. So I'll say howdy first, because myself and my business partner, Ron, we're in Texas. So we are actually financial advisors. Ron and I met as financial advisors several years ago. We've been in the financial services business for well over a decade. And before that, Ron and I were both very entrepreneurial. We didn't know each other, but we were very entrepreneurial. And we met each other and decided to form our own company as financial advisors, and went independent as financial advisors several years ago. Probably 2017, Ron had been talking to me quite a bit about cryptocurrency. Right at the time, it was all I knew was Bitcoin. It was Bitcoin, and I was like many financial advisors and said I didn't believe in it. It was a scam. It was a big deal. It wasn't backed by anything. All those things that we hear about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. But finally, I decided to take a stab at it, and I went onto Coinbase and I bought some cryptocurrency. I did not buy Bitcoin. I bought ETH. That was my first crypto purchase. And it was at about $250 at the time. And probably within a week and a half, it was up over 400. And I thought, this is awesome. By the way, if you've never traded cryptocurrency, it trades 24/7, which means literally every moment that I woke up in the middle of the night, I checked my phone. I checked my phone walking down the stairs and up the stairs and in the bathroom and making breakfast. And every 8 minutes, I was checking my phone to see what the price of ETH was. And I thought I was a genius investor. And so a month later, I bought one called Litecoin, and I bought it at about $75, and it went up to about 110 within a week and a half. And I thought, I'm done. Like, I'm going to be retired in like a month. This is so easy. I can't believe we found this. How have I not been doing this for so long? And then Ron said, did you know there are thousands of these things and we can go trade those? I said, you've got to be kidding me. So he introduced me. I apologize, I'm kind of throwing Ron under the bus here, but he introduced me to several cryptocurrency exchanges. And I said, oh my gosh, there's thousands of these. Let's go trade them. This will be great. We'll make so much money. And we didn't make that much money because trading them is not that easy. But what I did was we said, oh my gosh, I can't believe there's thousands of these. Why? What is their purpose? And Ron explained a little bit of it to me, which got me started. And then I went way down the proverbial rabbit hole. I said, I have to learn everything about this. I learned everything about Bitcoin, blockchain, cryptocurrency, digital assets, decentralized finance for months and months. And Ron and I were both really excited. We said, this is just going to change everything. This is the cliche is it's kind of the internet of money. But when you think about what the internet did 25, 30 years ago, how it changed how we communicate and how information is disseminated and how we can interact with each other and what that's done. Imagine doing the same thing with money, right? Because one of the limiting factors of the internet is the fact that I still have to use a credit card, and that still has to go over bank payment rails, right? I'm still subject to banking regulations and to banking piping and bank infrastructure and banking hours, right? I can't send money on the weekends. I'm subject to still 2 decimal points in my currency, right? That's very overlooked. Like only 2 decimal points in currency is kind of a big deal when you start talking about micro payments. You start talking about the idea of wanting to lend money to some small farmer in India, right? I mean, there's a lot being taken out. So we got really excited about the idea of this blockchain technology and where it could go. But did very little with it. We thought we might be consultants or something, but no one in Houston, Texas really cared about blockchain at the time. They cared about oil and gas and real estate, construction, the things that we care about here, and no one wanted to hear about it. So we went on with our financial planning business for a couple more years. And then early in 2019, we started getting invited to speak at some crypto conferences, because honestly, there were only like 3 financial advisors in the country that would even talk about cryptocurrency, and we were among them. And then again, going back to Ron's ideas, in September of 2019, he said, you know what, we really like explaining this stuff. Why don't we just record you explaining it and put it on YouTube? And you get on the whiteboard and just explain it just like you would any other financial concepts we'd explain to any of our clients. And I said, all right, I'll try it. I don't know if anyone will watch it. So we did that, and we actually recorded about 20 of them before we released the YouTube channel, because my thought was, as soon as we do this, everyone's going to do it and we're going to be behind. So we recorded like 20 of them, launched it, and those people in the kind of cryptocurrency community and the decentralized finance community seemed to like it, because the style was, we're not coming at you from the techie perspective, overly techie. It's not overly financial, talking about inflation hedges and very arcane, Austrian economics. It was very much, here's how this works. Here's how I'd explain to you if you were a client sitting in my office. And most importantly, here's why this is important, why this exists, what, if any, current parts of the ecosystem are inefficient, and we're trying to make those more efficient by use of this new technology. Why is it important for you as either an investor or in your business or in other businesses, if you're a student? Why is this, and why will it be important for you, for the world, for the financial ecosystem, all of that? That's really what we try to get across and explain how all these pieces work together. So that's where we are with Interaxis. So early this year, we decided we needed to start educating those specifically in the financial sector, because the ones really trying to educate those in the financial sector were the ones who were either developing the technology, so they're the kind of more techie, or the ones that had been involved in crypto for years, maybe have a fund or something, so they have a vested interest. Like, I'm going to teach you about Bitcoin because I want you to invest in my Bitcoin fund, right? So I'm going to teach you just enough to get you to invest in my fund or through my company. But not really educate you on the whole thing, not educate advisors on how to help clients, and not educate bankers on how it fits their day. So that's where we are now. That's what Interaxis is our goal is to find ways to educate the financial professionals, whether they be financial advisors, family offices, investors, bankers, educate you on how digital assets, cryptocurrency, blockchain, decentralized finance works, and therefore how it can impact your job or your investments or your clients. So that was a really long-winded answer to get us to where we are today. But just like we do when we explain crypto and Bitcoin, we have to go back to the beginning to get to where we are.
Absolutely, and it's a good story to pull all that together. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So I think you touch on a really interesting aspect here, and I think probably when you talk about the timings of when you were talking about that, you saw a lot of people who did what you did, get onto that sort of gravy train, see some immediate wins, think they were Rockefeller all of a sudden, and foresaw their ease to an easy life and desert islands, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden, just as quickly as that sort of came, it lost, and the sort of get rich quick scheme of crypto isn't quite what it made out. We spoke again last week about the sort of ICO boom that then happened afterwards, and why I think this is so fascinating, and why I think your timing is perfect. Is this time it has required education, and potentially there wasn't. It was the Wild West last time, in its physical, if not geographic, sense of what was happening. Right now, we're seeing something which I think has got a lot more in the game. It seems to me, and the sort of mainstream aspect we were just talking about sort of the merger or the interest, the genuine interest of governments and banks at the moment seem to be taking it there. So why is it different this time? What needs to happen differently, and what sort of part do you play in that?
So that's a really good question. So if we look back at the ICO boom, of course, I always go back to go forward, right? If you look at the ICO boom, there was quite a bit of fraud. And for anyone who doesn't know what the ICO boom was, it was basically a bunch of people who brought out these, would bring out their cryptocurrency projects and say, you can invest in my project and you'll get cryptographic tokens, right? You'll get cryptocurrency that hopefully will go be traded on an exchange. And you might have bought these for 0.0001 cents each, and you hope they go to $1 and you're all of a sudden a millionaire. That was the whole point. Now, so many people saw that and said, okay, I'm going to create some fraudulent company and just raise a bunch of money from around the world and walk away with it. Some people actually created what they thought was going to be a good company, and this was their funding mechanism. That turned out to either be illegal, it turned out to be an illegal way to raise money. It's not that the company was illegal, it's just the way they raised money was not compliant, or the business just didn't work. It just didn't work. So, but what we have to look at from the ICO boom is the fact is 2 points. One, it was a more efficient way to raise money, right? Because if you look at the overall financial system, the whole point is you're trying to get money that is sitting in my pocket being inefficient into some place that it can be more efficient, right? That someone else can take that and make more wealth out of it and build something out of it. And the way that the system we have now that has a whole bunch of regulation and a whole bunch of friction in it makes it very hard for me sitting here in Texas to get my money to someone who might be able to do something good with that money elsewhere in the world. So what ICOs showed us was, on one hand, there are more efficient methods to do it. Now, we have to regulate and make sure they're not fraudulent, but they're more efficient ways. But on the other hand, there is so much money waiting to be deployed in that way from around the world that we saw, okay, we need a more efficient system. We just need to regulate it. So you can look at the ICO boom and go, man, that was just a bunch of frauds and people stealing money. But in reality, you go, what did we learn from it? We learned that there is a pent-up supply and a pent-up demand. There are these great software developers all over the world that if we can just get them some funds somehow, they can create some really cool, efficient systems. Okay, that's kind of what we learned. The same way, Toby, you go back to probably the IPO boom, the late 90s, early 2000s of the internet, where so many of those were just not very good companies, right? It was just, we're trying to get eyeballs, and they would go public, a month after the company was started. And a year later, they were all bankrupt and they were blowing the money on parties and Super Bowl ads and everything else. But out of that grew Amazon and Google and eventually Facebook and all these other technologies that we use. So something good came out of it, and the growth of the internet came out of it. So the ICO boom, yes, people lost money and it's bad and we have to regulate it. But what came out of it was the fact that everyone looked and said, oh, we need a more efficient mechanism to get money that is sitting there doing nothing to people who can actually create something out of it, right? Yeah. So now the question is, what is different now? What's different now is, one, if you look at digital assets like Bitcoin, right? There's more institutions behind it. There's more money behind it. They've built more infrastructure. There's lending facilities and lending capabilities, and banks are behind it. And there's been more government regulation, which is actually a good thing in this case, because it means I can feel comfortable putting my money in that asset because the government has kind of blessed it, right? In several instances, the government has blessed it. They've blessed the bank or the custodian that's going to hold it for me. They've said, you're okay to do this. It's not a fraud. We've checked you out. There's insurance behind it. So that's a big part of why it's better this time. Why is it? Why?
Sorry to cut in. Why now though for the bank? What's different with government? Governments who were banning it, suspicious of it, and banks who were poo-pooing it. I remember it was described to me by one senior banker as the sort of playground of criminals, et cetera, which is obviously developed over the course of only 4 or 5 years from something that was largely scoffed at as to a sort of villain's playground to something which now they're moving into. Tell us about why.
Sure. Well, remember, Bitcoin itself was developed as meant to be a peer-to-peer system. It's a peer-to-peer economic system. meaning I can send you Bitcoin without having to go through a single bank or any other entity. It's called disintermediating, right? We're taking out all those factors in the middle that take out fees and friction and stop that from happening. I can send you Bitcoin right now, and no one else in the world has to be involved. It's just our transaction. So yes, early on, it did become a place that criminals used for, for nefarious purposes, right? Silk Road was the famous one that people were trading drugs and guns and people, and there were, assassination attempts and all that were paid for with Bitcoin. And the reason was because it didn't have to go through the banks. I didn't have to go get cash from the bank to go buy, illegal mushrooms, right? I could just send Bitcoin for it, and I didn't have to answer to the bank, and I didn't have to carry cash or anything like that. So yes, it went down that direction first, and that's kind of what the media and the government grabbed onto. But if you think about the purpose of it, and the purpose of what those people were doing with Silk Road, well, there was a need, and the need was, I need to figure out a way to get money to someone else somewhere in the world and have it be safe and not have the government take it. And Bitcoin is the perfect medium for that, right? So they found it. Now, after Silk Road, and the government kind of got a hold of that and said, okay, we need to figure out how to regulate this a little bit. Well, now businesses said, oh, well, we can do that too. Not that we're trying to avoid the government, but what is this Bitcoin thing we've heard about? And they started digging in, and institutions, businesses, even some government people said, well, look, Bitcoin could just completely go away at this point, or it could continue to grow in value. We're not quite sure. Okay, now remember that there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. So this idea that if I want to put my money into something that has a very limited supply, Bitcoin can be that thing. And some big investors, some early investors, some high-level people started saying, look, I'm going to try it out and speculate a little bit and put my money into that and see what happens. And more people started doing it. Notably the Winklevoss twins, right? The ones who, got made famous before for being the ones
Facebook.
who, with Facebook. Well, they were some of the earliest adopters and started a Bitcoin hedge fund that everyone thought was crazy. And now they have this unbelievable Bitcoin and crypto empire now that they're building. They're building custodians, and they just partnered up with a bank there in the UK to offer Gemini, their company called Gemini, custodial and trading facilities there in the UK. So
it's an extraordinary story, there, isn't it?
It is. It's a great story, a great book to read, Bitcoin Billionaires. Highly recommend it. Really interesting about basically what they had to do after Facebook, after that movie and book came out, right? So what's happened is Bitcoin went down and up and down and up in value. And even after 2017, which you alluded to, right, when it ran up and now it went back down. But the fact that it's come back now again, people have said, okay, I think we've gotten to the point where enough institutions, enough big names are behind it and say, look, this is a store of value. This is something we're going to use potentially instead of gold now to store our money in, to store our value in, because of some of the characteristics of it. Now it's gotten to the point where banks have gone, okay, well, we need to help out. We need to be a part of this. Otherwise, we're going to get replaced. Yeah. Right. So we need to figure out how to join, or we're going to get pushed aside. So banks are starting to figure out, and so they kind of go to regulators and go, hey, what can you do so that people can feel comfortable holding this asset, that they're not completely personally responsible for it. Right. And that would have to get into some of I'd have to get into technicals and probably get on the whiteboard to explain more about that, which is what we
show too.
Exactly. Exactly. We can have one that is just Adam teaches Bitcoin. But the banks have said, look, we want to help people feel more comfortable with it, because because one of the biggest barriers to entry in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is the technology aspect. The fact that you have to understand, words and things like wallets and transactions and private keys and seed phrases. And it puts a lot of the onus on the investor and the owner to keep that security. Whereas now we're so used to outsourcing that to the banks and such. We're used to outsourcing so much trust to banks and governments. And what Bitcoin and crypto has said is we're now going to outsource that trust to computer code and to an army of transaction, an army of computers around the world that are all going to interact and clear all these transactions. If we're going to do that, well, we need some way to feel safe. We need some way for the average person to feel comfortable with it, that I don't feel like I'm in the Matrix, right? Or Terminator or something like that, where the machines are taking over. And that's where the regulators and the banks have kind of come in and said, look, we need to help make people feel comfortable with this. And the way we do it is we can say, okay, this company, this bank, this custodian can actually hold your cryptocurrency, hold your digital assets, and we, the government, are okay with that. We're good with it. We're not going to fully say you can, pay your taxes in it yet, but we're okay with banks actually holding it and keeping track of it for you, because they have the insurance, right? They have third-party insurance on top of it that says, if something happens, if there's a hack or what have you, then you are somewhat protected, because the real point of the government regulation is make sure people don't lose their money, right? Make sure people don't get scammed, make sure people don't lose their money, especially the little guys. Make sure the little guys don't lose their money, right? The big guys, we don't care. The little guys, we care.
Yeah.
So I'm not even sure I answered your question on that, because I went in so many different places, but I hope
do you know what? I love that. I love it when people go off on alleyways, because I do it exactly the same myself. And this comes back down to, something which we were talking about just before the show, is that this has been driven by you enjoying and having a passion for what you're doing. And these shows have been characterized all the way through this year by people who are hugely passionate about creating value and providing something there which does what these technologies can do and achieves potential. And I love hearing people who are as passionate as you are about the education of this particular product base.
It's funny you mentioned that, Toby, because Ron and I, we kind of enjoyed being financial advisors, but part of that is or was teaching, going through the puzzle. You bring us your financial life right now, and we need to kind of take apart the puzzle and figure out what we can do now. What arrows do we have to make you more efficient and to help you along the way, and to be able to answer questions. And we actually changed our fee structure to where we could just bill monthly. And we told our clients, look, we charge you monthly because we want you to ask us questions. We want things to come up, and we figure out what we need to do next. And then we can explain to you why we're doing this or where it comes from, and have the conversations. And that's what we like. The financial advisory business has gotten very much based on how much money you can make for me, how much you can grow my assets, not how much can you help me live my life and have money to pay for it, right? And we like this because this is very new. So helping folks like financial advisors understand not just cryptocurrency investment, because that's one piece, but where digital assets are going, how I can potentially own a piece of real estate or a real estate fund later that is denoted with what's called a security token, a cryptographic token, and what benefits that's going to get for my clients. We're seeing this rise of millennials who want to invest in more alternative assets, like that's going to grow in popularity. And so what we want to do is help those financial advisors that have kind of been stuck going down the same path, because that's where the business has gone, and say, look, we're going to help explain to you this new piece, and not just in a come invest with us way, but in a, we want you to really understand it, because we think it's going to go in so many different directions that understanding the basics now is going to get you this understanding and ability to do your own research later and to decide what path you want to go later with your practice. Same with banks and bankers. They're going to have to learn how to interact with the crypto companies, the digital asset companies, the decentralized companies, and we want to help them do that. We don't want to be the ones that go, you guys are getting replaced. Hope you've enjoyed your time. We're going, no, you serve a vital purpose. And we want to make sure that you understand, because when you understand, then we can figure out how to all work together. And we enjoy that part. I enjoy explaining this to people, because you see lights start to go on. And when they email a day later and go, I was just thinking and I had a question, or I saw an article, how does this pertain? And I go, yes, now you've got it. Like you're starting to go, like you're coming down the rabbit hole with me, except you don't have to go down the rabbit hole as far as we did. because we're kind of handing it all to you. Like we're taking all the rabbit hole stuff and condensing it and going, here's what's important for you.
Yeah.
Right. So
that demystification is so important, though, isn't it? Because these are things here which are relatively complex in some aspects to be able to get your head around, and when it's broken down and it's to its core sense. And I've seen some of the the videos you're doing. It suddenly makes everything a little bit more understandable and relatable to it. Because look, I want to sort of segue that to shoot back to something which you talked before, which is the technology aspect. Because look, there's the financial piece and the trading piece, which I think is people can get their head around. The tech is probably one of the underlying parts here, which is so important. And I remember going back again to 2017 and beforehand, when people were talking about the sort of real crypto hype that was going on. As much as it as an asset class, effectively, the biggest excitement was around the technology that sustained it and what people could do with blockchain. So I think people thought that the crypto hype would disappear and blockchain would come to the fore and it would revolutionize trading technology as a whole. There's still very much the perception that will be there. I think people were thinking it was accelerating so quickly that it would be mainstream by now. Right. Other people were saying it would be a 5 to 10 year curve before that sort of really got to its potential as to what it could do. This year has been characterized by the speed of digital innovation, where we've seen people sort of adopt new tech and cloud technology in particular over, people have said, 10 years worth of innovation in 3 months. I would have thought that would have coincided with a little bit more movement around blockchain technology at the same sort of stage. But it still seems to be lagging a little bit. Talk to me about the tech aspect and what you're seeing, what you're thinking there.
With the tech, that's a really good question, because the tech aspect, and look, I'm not a techie. Ron's actually much more of a techie than I am. He's gone and learned how to program and learned how to code and everything. And so he gets to read all the white papers and then tell me, and I'm the one who gets to go on
translate it,
YouTube and TV and draw on the whiteboard. So I get to be the star when Ron is actually the one who's really doing the research. But the tech aspect of it, for the time being, it's so important to understand, because like I said, we want to make sure people get it a little bit. I mean, you can go so far down there and I don't understand it. We don't understand it. There are some unbelievably smart, talented people that are dealing with the tech part of it. But what it comes down to is it's basically an evolution that just kind of makes sense, right? We have continuously outsourced little bits to technology. Right? We have continuously outsourced little bits of our lives to technology, right? Mm-hmm. The fact that I have my phone that's on me all the time, that it is bizarre. If I call my wife and she doesn't answer, I think something's wrong. I can't even imagine that 30 or 40 years ago. It's like we would go our separate ways for the day and we'd meet back up at home later, right? Yeah. That was it. That was the extent of it. And maybe we had an answering machine where I could leave a message and say, I'll be home late. That was the extent of our technology. And now it was great. I can't even imagine the fact that I used to leave my house when I was a kid and my mom had no idea where I was until I came home, and that was perfectly acceptable. Yeah. I can't even imagine that now. But the technology has come to the point where we just keep outsourcing little bits and little bits and little bits to it. And this is just really kind of a natural evolution. But it ends up being a relatively big change, because now you're talking about money, which is very emotional for people. And it's interesting you brought up the 2020 and how odd it's been. You would expect that blockchain and crypto would have made more growth here. But what I think we're going to see is some of the aspects of 2020 are actually driving more of crypto adoption or blockchain adoption in the future. Yeah, we weren't ready for 2020. So if this weird year happened in 2 years, we'd be all over it. But there hadn't been enough trust and adoption and understanding yet. So you look at things like the election here in the US. Well, that has spurred so many people to go, we need to change how we do this. Right? This is just not a good, efficient system that we have. Are there other ways? And there are all these other people putting their hands up going, we've had this blockchain thing that we've been talking about for a while. How are we not working on this? Well, this is the impetus to spur people to start really, really looking into it, right? On top of the fact that now you have real companies being built on the technology. You have real money being moved and real revenues, right? And government adoption. So you're having more and more of that. And this is the year, I think, that is going to have all those use cases now that get people working on it. They get the funding for it to be ready for the next time, right?
Yeah,
COVID contact tracing would be perfect, right?
Yeah.
Choosing who or proving who's gotten the vaccine or who's had COVID would be perfect for blockchain technology. But we can't, be going through COVID and at the same time going, here's this new technology, put it on your phone. We're going to trace where you are, but we promise the government doesn't know where you are at this very moment, right? You can't have all that at one time. It's just too much this year, right? It was enough that you and I are doing a Zoom call, and that's my entire day of Zoom calls. That's enough technology for 1 year. Like we need to slow ourselves down a little bit and go, okay, we've seen the cool use cases now. We've seen how research can be shared, right? Data can be shared now. We see the need potentially with elections, with contact tracing and vaccines and all that. So we're probably going to get there faster now than we would have. The same way we brought up the kind of criminal aspect of Bitcoin and crypto years ago, which in reality kind of sped up the adoption of cryptocurrency, right? It sped up some of that. The same way I'll go back, and I don't know if we want to talk about this, but back in 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, with the internet, if you want to really look at what pushed it forward, it was porn, sports, gambling. That pushed the internet forward faster than anything else did. We got video and payment faster because of porn, sports, and gambling. Now, whether or not you want to admit that, like that's what happened. Like those were some of the first use cases, right? Everyone wanted to see their sports, and everyone wanted to see someone they weren't supposed to see, and they were willing to pay for it, and it had to be safe, right? And then there was a dude in Seattle who started selling books, like that. We had to figure out how to make that safe, and that pushed it ahead. And that doesn't make it wrong. That's just you need some sort of impetus. And if 2020, whatever it is the impetus that says, oh, we got this new technology that could have solved a lot of these problems in 2020 if we already had it, or made it easier to solve. Now, everyone's going to actually start looking at those and go, oh, well, now if we back test it to that would have been the perfect use case if we had it. Let's make sure we have it for the next time. Let's make sure the next time there's a disease like this, we have it ready.
This goes back to your point about the dot-com bubble. Effectively, and the sort of companies that sort of navigated themselves through that then sped up and changed the world at this stage. So what you're effectively saying is this is a world-changing moment without over-egging a souffle. This looks like
it's world-changing. Look, I keep saying 2020, COVID, all of that. When we look back at the history books, it's going to be like 2 pages, right? It's going to be virtually nothing. But yes, there is between the idea of decentralized finance, cryptocurrency, blockchain, what everything's how with COVID and elections and all that. Yeah, it's life-changing, altering, but it's still going to iterate slowly, just like the internet kind of iterated slowly through people. There were people who did not want to adopt it and took forever with email, and that was a big problem. And would never put their credit card number into this website thing and expect that a book was actually going to make it to their house within a week and a half. That was crazy talk back in 95, right? Of really, you have thousands of books at your disposal and you're going to sell them to me and all I have to do is give you my credit card. What kind of crook are you? There's no way I can do that. But now, like Amazon has, 5 of my credit cards on file, and I'm kind of okay with it because it makes my life easier, right? But it takes a long time to iterate through that. So this will take a while. It's not like next year, all of a sudden, we're going to have a whole new financial system. It's going to take a while for people to adopt, but they're going to get it, right? And maybe this year was a little bit of that impetus that moved it along just that much faster and got people to agree, that much more. That maybe this is something we need to look at because it would have really helped this year to have it.
Yeah. So Adam, look, you sit there at the sort of the front and center of this, being able to sort of help people, as we say, demystify, solve the riddle of this. Who are you talking to, and who should be reaching out for you? Because like I say, there's constant fascinating stuff that comes out on your LinkedIn that I'm seeing
Oh,
now.
well,
Now we've been connected.
Completely appreciate that. Anyone who's a little bit curious about cryptocurrency, about digital assets, decentralized finance, right? So if you're in the financial sector, if you're into investing, if you are an investor, family office, if you're a bank or so, I mean, those are the people we want to help. We help train your internal training, but the goal is, how interested are you? Do you feel it's going to be part of your business going forward? We're not here to force it on you. We're not here to say you have to learn this or else, you have to buy Bitcoin or else, or anything like that. It's if you're interested, if you're starting to see that, and that's what some of our LinkedIn posts and Twitter posts and such are about, is little pieces of news or something that we go, hey, here's a little bit more. It's coming just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And if you start to get concerned that it's going to pass you up, we're here to help. Like, just contact us through wherever, Twitter, LinkedIn, email, whatever you want, and we're here to help. Go check out the YouTube channel, and you see kind of how we do it and what we explain. And I promise you'll learn a tremendous amount. And that's kind of me being full of myself, but it's what we enjoy doing, right? It's what we do. Just like if you're a really good investor, you tell people, hey, here's my results. I'm kind of good at what I do. Well, this is what we found that we do. It took me 45 years to figure out what we're good at. And taking this really complex technical financial concepts and explaining it to people, hopefully in a way they can understand, is what we're pretty good at.
It seems to be working so far, and I've loved it. Just finding out about you only a couple of weeks ago to to sort of starting to absorb some of the content, and even having this conversation now.
Yeah,
it's just great. It's great fun.
Sorry to interrupt a bit, but from your perspective, like people who are, thinking about their careers, like they're, changing jobs, or want to change jobs, or want to make sure that, look, I'm relatively young and I want to make sure that I continue to have a career in the finance world, or I want to make my mark and be different. This is something you can learn, because and you decide, is this going to be the future of finance or is it not?
Yeah.
If you think it's not, then you go, look, I don't need to learn this. If you think it is, go, oh, I want to learn it and maybe be a little different, or maybe be the person who's in charge of it at my company or something. Those are
this is absolutely the point, and what I find so interesting about what you've been talking about. There are people who we're talking to every single day who are looking in many aspects to reskill as the world digitalizes, and one of the things we see an awful lot of is people who are qualified in other areas looking to get onto this fintech bandwagon, looking to reskill and retrain, and talking about how their skills, particularly from sort of sales, trading, potentially moving over to the fintech one, so we can come into it here. The issue is where's the points of differentiation, and what's how does one stand out in the crowd? And for me, that sort of upskilling the area, particularly in that sales world, where I think you see a lot of people who are strong salespeople but lack some of the depth and the credibility to talk the language, and not then going out and educating themselves. And a greater need, more than ever before, with the advent of solution sales, for people to be able to talk that language and to have that level of credibility and education that we haven't seen as much over recent years. This to me is an absolute no-brainer for people to get involved with you to do that. And from a company perspective, look, if you're there and looking to differentiate your sales teams, with people, or indeed your technologists, to how they can stand out and get further ahead and take this complex subject and understand it in a much more straightforward way, I think it's tremendously exciting. I think there's Ray introduced us, and it was. I can absolutely see why, because he loves collecting, by the sounds of it, some very, very interesting people, and made no exception with you guys within it. But listen, I've loved it. I've loved talking to you. I've loved hearing the story, and look, I urge anyone who's interested in taking this a little bit further to start off, and I think you probably agree to this. Start off just by absorbing some of that content on LinkedIn, so absorbing some of the content on Twitter, looking at some of those YouTube channels, and then reaching out and getting that sort of education to really help launchpad your knowledge and understanding of an area that I absolutely agree with you is only going one way, and that's an exciting journey to be on. Adam, is there anything else that you want to finish up on and run past everyone?
I don't think we do. We the beauty of it is, Toby, that you're there in the UK, we're here in Texas.
Yeah.
And what we talk about here in this digital asset, decentralized finance, crypto, it's actually international, it's universal. So learning it is kind of the same. And it could be the financial ecosystem that really brings the world together from a financial perspective. So when you talk about you use a really interesting word, reskill. As you're looking to reskill, it's a way to make yourself attractive internationally, because you potentially have this. And I'll also say this, learning what we've learned about crypto and digital assets and decentralized finance, I've learned more about economics and traditional finance in the last few years of learning all this than I had in college and in years in the financial services industry and everything, because we got so used to the way things were done that we didn't question them. Well, now you have to go back and question them to be able to learn this. And I have learned more about traditional world finance than I ever did in any other setting. So I'll say that as well. Just learning this teaches you so much more about economics and how people work and think and incentives and all that. So I'll also kind of leave on that. But yeah, follow us, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. And if you have questions, let us know. We're always happy to answer.
It is a train which I implore everyone to jump aboard. Listen,
come on.
It is, Adam. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for sharing with us. I'm glad everything's going well, and you've got a great story to tell. Really appreciate you sharing it with us on Fintech Focus today. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks so much, Toby. We really appreciate it. Love what you're doing.
Absolute pleasure. And thank you all for watching. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have today. Loads and loads of value for you. Plenty more coming up in recent weeks as well. Coming weeks as well, and lovely to have you all with us. We'll see you soon on another episode of Fintech Focus TV. Thanks ever so much. Cheers.